The moment I stepped into the hanging house of Blackwater Lane, the air thickened with the scent of aged wood and something else. Something metallic, like old blood soaked into the floorboards, though the cheerful Airbnb listing had promised a charming Victorian retreat in the heart of rural England. The walls, papered in faded florals, seemed to breathe as shadows stretched unnaturally long in the flickering light of the wrought iron chandelier, and the staircase groaned underfoot as if burdened by invisible feet. That first night, I woke with a searing pain around my neck, my fingers clawing at raw, rope-burned flesh, though my room was empty, the door still locked from the inside. The others, 3 fellow guests lured by the same too-good-to-be-true listing, found similar marks by morning, their confusion mirroring mine, our laughter brittle as we joked about shared nightmares, though none of us remembered dreaming at all. The next night, we set up cameras, determined to catch a prankster or perhaps a gas leak causing hallucinations. But the footage showed something worse. Me, eyes wide and unseeing, moving like a marionette toward the attic door, my hands outstretched as if pulled by unseen strings, the others following in a silent, sleepwalking procession. The attic was a nightmare frozen in time. Nooses, frayed and stained, swayed ever so slightly in the draftless air, the rafters above scarred by the weight of countless hangings, the floor beneath them scuffed by desperate, dragging feet. The historian we called, a gaunt man with a pallor that suggested he'd spent too long among the dead, uncovered the truth with trembling hands. The house was built by Elias Vane, a 19th century executioner driven mad after being forced to hang innocent men, women, and finally, in a fit of guilt-racked delirium, his own family, their ghosts tethered to the house by his unspeakable sins. The nooses, he whispered, weren't just remnants, they were invitations, a way for Vane's spirit to reenact his crimes using fresh victims, their souls becoming temporary vessels for his lost wife, son, and daughter, their deaths repeated over and over to soothe his eternal torment. We tried to leave then, but the doors refused to open, the windows sealed as if by invisible hands, the house itself alive and hungry. One by one, the others vanished in the night, their screams muffled by the thick walls, their bodies found at dawn hanging limp from the rafters, faces twisted in expressions of waking terror. By the final night, I was alone, barricaded in the smallest bedroom, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the temperature dropped and the walls wept condensation that smelled of sweat and tears. I must have passed out from exhaustion, because I woke mid-air, the noose already tight around my neck, my legs kicking frantically at nothing, the attic floor impossibly far below. And then I saw him, Elias Vane, his hollow eyes gleaming with something like gratitude as he watched me choke, his lips moving in a silent prayer. But the worst part? The moment my vision blurred, I felt my body go slack, my consciousness slipping not into darkness, but into another's memories. A young girl's, her name stolen, her voice silenced, her terror eternal. And as my last thought dissolved into hers, I realized with gut-wrenching clarity, I wasn't dying. I was becoming the new daughter, the new victim. The house had me now, and the cycle would begin again. The rope bit deeper, my vision tunneling into a pinprick of dim light as my body convulsed, my fingers scraping uselessly against the rough fibers, the attic air thick with the scent of mildew and something fouler. Decay, desperation, the lingering stench of old sweat from 100 throats that had strained against this same noose. I could feel her, the girl whose name I now knew was Eleanor, her memories flooding into me like ice water, her terror merging with mine until I couldn't tell where she ended and I began. I saw through her eyes as Elias, her father, his face a mask of grief and madness, fastened the noose around her neck, his hands shaking not from hesitation but from something worse, conviction, the belief that this was mercy, that death was kinder than the shame of his crimes. The floor dropped away beneath her, just as it had for me, and in that final second she didn't scream. She whispered his name, not in anger but in heartbreak. And then darkness. But not for me. Not truly. Because when I gasped awake, my throat ragged and burning, I wasn't in the attic anymore. I was in the hallway, standing before a mirror, my reflection warped in the age-speckled glass, my face not entirely my own. My lips moved, but the voice that came out was hers, soft, trembling, calling for a father who was long dead yet somehow still here, still pulling the strings. The house sighed around me, the floorboards creaking in a rhythm like a slow, satisfied heartbeat, the walls humming with a presence that wasn't just Elias but all of them. Every soul who had died here, their anguish woven into the very foundation. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. They carried me instead to the window, where the moonlit garden below seemed to writhe with shadowy figures, their necks bent at unnatural angles, their faces turned upward, watching, waiting. And then I understood. I wasn't just a vessel for Eleanor. I was her replacement, the new thread in the tapestry of suffering that kept this house alive. The others, the guests before me, had played their parts too, their deaths reenacting the executions Elias had performed, their souls trapped in an endless loop of his making. But Eleanor's role had been different. She wasn't just a victim. She was the key, the one whose death had broken him completely, the sin he could never outrun. And now I was her. The realization hit me like a fist to the chest as my body turned, puppet-like, toward the stairs, my feet moving of their own accord, the pull of the attic irresistible. Because the house wasn't done with me yet. It would never be done with me. And as I climbed, the rope burns around my neck throbbing in time with my pulse. I knew the truth. This wasn't just a haunting. It was an inheritance, and I was now the heir. The stairs groaned beneath me as I ascended, each step heavier than the last, my breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps that did nothing to ease the fire in my lungs. Because I wasn't breathing for myself anymore. I was breathing for her, for Eleanor. Her ghost coiled inside me like a second spine. Her sorrow so deep it felt like my own ribs were cracking under the weight of it. The attic door stood ajar, swaying gently as if someone had just passed through, though I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach twist, that no living thing had touched it in decades. The nooses still hung there, their shadows long and crooked in the pale moonlight, but now there were more of them, too many to count, swaying in a breeze that didn't exist, each one whispering a name. Thomas, Mary, James, names I didn't know but she did, names that made her whimper inside my skull. And then I saw him, Elias. Not a ghost, not a memory, but something worse, something solid, his form flickering between the gaunt, grief-ravaged man he'd been and something monstrous, his fingers too long, his mouth stretched too wide, his eyes black pits that dripped a thick, tar-like substance onto the floorboards. He reached for me, and my body moved toward him without my consent, my arms lifting as if to embrace him, even as every nerve in my body screamed to run. His hands closed around my throat, not to strangle me, but to position me, his touch almost tender as he guided me beneath the noose that had once taken his daughter, the fibers of the rope humming against my skin like live wires. I tried to fight, but Eleanor's presence inside me wanted this, needed it, her love for him twisted into something sick and desperate, a daughter's longing for a father's approval even in damnation. The noose tightened, and this time I didn't kick. I didn't scream, because I finally understood this wasn't just punishment. It was a performance, a ritual, and I was the star. The floor vanished, and for one impossible, gut-churning moment, I hung there, suspended between life and death. The pain unbearable, but also familiar, like I'd done this 1,000 times before. And then snap. Not my neck. Something else. The world split, reality peeling back like rotting wallpaper to reveal the truth beneath. The house was alive, its walls pulsing like a throat, its foundations built not on brick and mortar but on bones, on the collective agony of everyone who had died here. And I wasn't just Eleanor now. I was all of them. Their memories surged through me, a flood of terror and despair, each death playing out in my mind like a reel of film. Over and over, no beginning, no end, just an endless loop of suffering. And then worst of all, I felt him, Elias, inside me too, his madness seeping into my thoughts, his voice slithering through my veins like poison. "You see now," he whispered, not in my ear but inside my skull, "why it must be this way." And I did. God help me, I did. Because the house wasn't just haunted. It was hungry, and we were its food. The moment stretched, snapped, and then I was back in my bed, the morning sun streaming through the curtains, my throat raw but unmarked, the rope burns gone as if they'd never been. For one dizzying second, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I moved, and my body didn't feel like my own. My hands were too pale, my fingers too delicate. And when I looked in the mirror, my reflection smiled at me with Eleanor's smile. The house had won. I was hers now, and the next guests were already on their way. The first knock at the door sent a jolt through me. No, through us, because Eleanor was coiled inside my mind like a serpent, her anticipation slithering through my veins as I moved toward the entrance, my steps too light, too graceful, no longer entirely mine. The couple on the doorstep looked so ordinary, so alive, their faces bright with vacation excitement, completely unaware of the way my fingers twitched at my sides, itching to usher them inside, to let the house taste their warmth. "Welcome," I heard myself say, my voice lilting in a way that wasn't my own, the words sweet as poisoned honey. "You're going to love it here." Their laughter as they crossed the threshold made my stomach clench. Or it should have, but Eleanor's presence smothered my revulsion, her ghostly fingers pressing against my lips to stifle any warning I might have uttered. The house exhaled around us, the air thickening with the scent of old roses and something darker, something rotting beneath the perfume. And I watched as the woman, Lila, her name tag said, shivered, her smile faltering for just a second before she brushed it off. "Chilly in here," she joked, rubbing her arms, and I wanted to scream, to shove them back out the door, but my body wasn't mine to control anymore. Instead, I smiled wider, my cheeks aching with the strain, and offered to show them to their room. The attic door, I noticed, was already slightly ajar. As night fell, I lay stiffly in my bed, listening to the house breathe around me, the walls creaking with restless energy. Eleanor's whispers filled my skull, her excitement a live wire under my skin, her memories flashing behind my eyes. The way her father's hands had trembled as he adjusted the noose, the way the rope had felt, rough and unyielding, the split second of blinding pain before the darkness took her. I squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't help. I could feel it happening again, somewhere above me. The couple's muffled footsteps as they sleepwalked to the attic, their breaths slow and even, their bodies moving like marionettes on invisible strings. The soft, sickening creak of the rafters accepting their weight. The silence afterward. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sounds weren't coming from outside. They were inside me, echoing in the hollow spaces Eleanor had carved out of my soul. When morning came, I found them in the parlor, pale but unharmed, their necks smooth and unmarked. They chatted over breakfast, oblivious, while I sat frozen, watching the way Lila's fingers kept drifting to her throat, her brow furrowed as if trying to recall a dream just out of reach. Her husband joked about the strange noises last night, and they laughed, but their laughter was too loud, too sharp, the sound of people trying to convince themselves they weren't afraid. They didn't know yet. They didn't understand that the marks wouldn't appear until after they left, that the house liked to play with its food, to let them think they'd escaped before the real horror began. And when they finally packed their bags and waved goodbye, their eyes already glazing over with the first tendrils of the house's influence, I didn't wave back. I just stood there, smiling Eleanor's smile, counting the hours until they'd be back. Because they always came back. The house made sure of it, and we would be waiting. The moment their car disappeared down the overgrown lane, the house shifted around me, the walls exhaling a sigh of satisfaction as the last echoes of living warmth faded from its halls. My hands, no, her hands, Eleanor's hands, twitched at my sides, the ghostly residue of their fear still clinging to my fingertips like static. I tried to resist, to claw my way back to the surface of my own mind, but she was stronger now, her presence a suffocating weight pressing against my ribs, her memories bleeding into mine until I could no longer remember which screams were hers and which were mine. The mirror in the hallway caught my reflection as I passed, and for a heart-stopping moment I saw him, Elias, standing behind me, his rotting hands resting on my shoulders, his lipless mouth curled into something that might have been a smile. Then the image rippled, and it was just me again, my face pale, my eyes hollow, the bruises around my throat blooming like dark violets beneath my skin. The attic door creaked open on its own, the scent of old rope and sweat drifting down the stairs, and my feet moved toward it without my consent, drawn like a moth to a flame. The nooses swayed gently in the stagnant air, their shadows stretching across the floor like grasping fingers, and I realized with dawning horror that there were two new ones among them, fresh, unweathered, the fibers still taut with anticipation. The house was preparing for the next guests already. It knew they would come. It always knew. A cold draft brushed against the back of my neck, and I turned to see Eleanor standing beside me, her form flickering between solid and spectral, her face a perfect mirror of my own except for the bruises circling her throat, the dark, sunken hollows of her eyes. "You see," she whispered, her voice like nails dragging across my spine. "This is how it has to be. This is how we survive." I wanted to scream, to deny her, but the words died in my throat as the first drop of blood hit the floorboards between us. Then another, and another. The rafters above us wept crimson, the droplets splattering against my face, my hands, my lips, and I realized with gut-wrenching clarity that it wasn't just blood. It was memory, the house feeding me the deaths of every soul it had claimed, their final moments playing out in vivid, agonizing detail behind my eyes. A man sobbing as the noose tightened, a woman begging for mercy, a child who didn't understand. Over and over, an endless reel of suffering, and at the center of it all, Elias, his madness a living thing, his grief a black hole that devoured everything it touched. The vision shattered as the front door slammed open downstairs, the sound jolting through me like a gunshot. Footsteps echoed in the foyer, too heavy, too deliberate, and I knew before I even turned, they were back. Lila and her husband, their faces slack, their eyes glazed, their necks ringed with angry red burns that hadn't been there when they left. They moved in perfect unison, their steps mechanical, their arms limp at their sides, and I understood then that the house had never let them go. It had only pretended to. It wanted them to think they'd escaped. It wanted them to hope, because hope made the fear so much sweeter when it finally crushed them. Eleanor's laughter bubbled up inside me, her delight a poison in my veins as the couple began to climb the stairs, their movements jerky, their mouths opening and closing soundlessly, like fish gasping for air. The attic door swung wider, the darkness beyond it yawning open like a mouth, and I realized with a surge of pure, animal terror that I was no longer just a prisoner, I was the warden. The house had made me its accomplice, and as the first noose slipped around Lila's neck, her husband standing motionless beside her, his face blank, his soul already half gone, I felt my lips curl into a smile that wasn't mine. "Shoo!" I heard myself whisper, my voice a grotesque parody of comfort. "It's better if you don't fight it." And as the floor dropped out from beneath them, as their bodies jerked and twisted in the empty air, I finally stopped screaming. Because the truth was worse than death. The truth was that part of me liked it, and that part was growing stronger every day. The moment their bodies stilled, swaying grotesquely like broken pendulums from the rafters, the house sighed, a deep, shuddering exhale that rattled the windows and sent dust motes dancing in the pale morning light now creeping through the attic's single grime-smeared window. My hands rose of their own accord, fingers outstretched toward the fresh corpses as if to caress them, and I felt Eleanor's satisfaction oozing through me like warm syrup, her ghostly fingers interlacing with mine as we admired the house's handiwork together. The rope burns around my own throat pulsed in time with my heartbeat, a constant reminder of the bond one could never break, the noose that had long since tightened around my soul. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 8 with a series of hollow, mocking chimes, and on cue, the front door creaked open again. Not from wind or intruder, but from the house itself, its hunger momentarily sated, now politely welcoming the next unwitting guests who would inevitably arrive by noon. The cycle demanded it. The real horror wasn't the deaths, I realized as I descended the stairs with Eleanor's grace in my steps, my reflection in the hallway mirror showing her hollow eyes superimposed over mine. It was the banality, the way the house operated with the precision of a well-oiled machine, the way the blood never stained the floors for long, the way new nooses materialized before the old ones even stopped swaying. By the time the cheerful family of 4 from London pulled into the drive, their minivan packed with suitcases and picnic baskets, I was already waiting on the porch with a pitcher of lemonade, the ice cubes clinking like shards of bone in the glass, my smile a perfect replica of the one from the Airbnb listing photos. The little girl, no older than 6, reached for my hand with sticky fingers, and as our skin touched, I felt the house purr through the rotting floorboards beneath us. Eleanor's whisper coiled through my mind like smoke. This one will play my role beautifully. And as I led them inside, the door slamming shut behind us with finality, I found myself humming the same lullaby Elias had sung to his daughter the night he killed her, the notes slithering off-key from lips that were no longer entirely my own. The house had won. I had lost. And the worst part, I wasn't even sure when I'd stopped minding. The family's laughter curdled in my ears as I led them through the foyer, their oblivious chatter bouncing off walls that drank their voices like a parched throat gulping water. The mother remarking on the quaint vintage charm, the father joking about ghost stories, their 2 children giggling as they raced up the staircase that groaned a little too loudly beneath their small feet. My fingers twitched at my sides, nails digging into my palms hard enough to draw blood. But the pain was distant, muted, as if someone had wrapped my nerves in layers of wool. Eleanor's presence swelled inside me, her anticipation a living thing slithering through my veins, her whispered instructions slimy against the inside of my skull. Put the parents in the blue room, the children in the nursery. He likes the young ones closest to the attic. The words left my mouth in a voice that was mine but not mine, cheerful and bright as I handed them their keys, the metal unnaturally cold against their palms though they didn't seem to notice. Dinner passed in a haze, their forks scraping against antique china, their teeth tearing into meat that smelled suspiciously rich, their glasses never quite emptying no matter how much wine they drank. I watched from the shadows of the kitchen doorway as the father's jokes grew slurred, as the mother's eyelids fluttered, as the children's heads drooped onto their arms, their breathing deepening into something unnatural, something orchestrated. The house was humming now, a sound just beneath human hearing that vibrated in my molars, in the hollow spaces between my ribs. When the grandfather clock struck midnight, they rose in unison, their movements jerky and marionette precise, their eyes glassy and unseeing as they began their procession upstairs. The little girl turned back at the landing, her face slack except for her eyes, her terrified, fully aware eyes, and in that moment I felt Eleanor's control slip just enough for my own scream to rip through our shared throat. But the sound was swallowed instantly by the house, absorbed into its endless hunger, and then my hands were moving again, guiding the child forward, her small fingers icy in mine. The attic door stood open, the nooses swaying gently in greeting, and as the family arranged themselves beneath the rafters with the practiced ease of actors taking their marks, I realized with sickening clarity that this wasn't possession, it was partnership. My soul hadn't been overwritten by Eleanor's, it had been braided with it, our horrors entwined until neither of us could remember where one ended and the other began. The first rope snapped taut with a sound like a breaking neck, and something deep in my chest unspooled in response, a dark, shameful pleasure blooming where my revulsion should have been. By the time the last body stopped twitching, my lips were moving in time with Eleanor's, our voices merging as we whispered the same words Elias had spoken to his victims. It will only hurt until it doesn't. The house sighed in contentment, its foundations settling like a well-fed beast, and as I turned to descend the stairs, already hearing the crunch of gravel under new tires outside, already tasting the next guest's fear like copper on my tongue, I finally understood the true horror wasn't being trapped in this cycle, but realizing I no longer wanted to escape it. The doorbell rang, bright and cheerful, and my reflection in the hallway mirror smiled back at me with too many teeth as I reached for the knob, the house breathing through my lungs as I swung it open to greet the fresh meat. The new guests stood on the threshold, a young couple, their fingers intertwined, their eyes bright with vacation excitement, completely unaware of the way the hallway behind me seemed to pulse with unnatural shadows, the walls contracting slightly like the gullet of some enormous beast preparing to swallow them whole. "Welcome to Blackwater Lane," I heard myself say, my voice dripping with a hospitality that curdled my own stomach even as the words left my lips. their warmth as artificial as the flush in my cheeks. The woman, Emily, her name would be Emily, I somehow already knew, stepped across the threshold first, her sandals clicking against floorboards that felt momentarily spongy beneath her feet before hardening again, the house tasting her, testing her resilience. Her boyfriend followed, his arms slipping possessively around her waist, and I had to bite down on the hysterical laugh bubbling up my throat when I saw how perfectly his neck would fit the newest noose, the one still slightly damp with the previous guest's sweat. The tour passed in a sickening pantomime of normalcy, my hands gesturing to antique furniture that hadn't been there yesterday, my lips praising plumbing I knew would spew rust-brown water the moment they tried to shower, my feet avoiding the floorboard that would creak exactly like a child's scream if stepped upon after midnight. As I showed them to their room, the lavender suite, where 3 generations of vain women had died, Emily's fingers brushed against a discolored patch of wallpaper, and the house responded instantly, the temperature dropping so abruptly our breath fogged in the air between us. Old houses, I chuckled, the sound like dry leaves rattling in my throat, full of drafts and secrets. The moment passed, the house withdrawing its presence just enough to lull them, but not before I saw the first flicker of unease cross their faces, not before I tasted the metallic tang of their quickening pulses, the seasoning that made their fears so delicious to whatever lurked in the walls. Dinner was a grotesque parody of hospitality, the food I served somehow richer, more succulent than anything my hands could have prepared, the wine swirling in their glasses with a viscosity that wasn't quite right. I watched from the kitchen doorway as they ate, as their laughter grew louder and more forced, as their pupils dilated beyond what the dim candlelight could explain. The grandfather clock's ticking grew louder with each passing minute, its hands moving in barely perceptible jerks, speeding toward the witching hour when the house would wake fully and begin its grim work. When Emily excused herself to the bathroom, I seized my moment, one last, desperate rebellion, and caught her wrist as she passed, my fingers gripping with bruising intensity as I tried to force out a warning through lips that fought to remain sealed. What emerged was a strangled whisper. The attic window, the latch. Before Eleanor's presence crashed over me like a wave, drowning my consciousness in a riptide of someone else's memories. I surfaced minutes later to find myself smiling beatifically at the couple again, pouring more of that suspiciously dark wine, my warning either unspoken or unheard. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with the scent of old rope and damp earth, and I found my body moving toward the attic stairs with dreadful inevitability, my limbs no longer my own, but merely vessels for the house's hunger. The nooses hung waiting, their shadows stretching long across the floorboards like grasping fingers, and as the first choked gasp echoed from the bedroom below, I realized with horrifying clarity that this time, I wouldn't be merely watching. The house had greater plans for me tonight. My hands, moving with practiced ease I didn't possess, began braiding fresh rope from strands of my own hair that fell out in clumps, the fibers weaving themselves together with a life of their own, because the cycle demanded new nooses for new victims, and I had become the weaver as well as the witness. The couple's footsteps on the stairs were eerily synchronized, their faces blank but their eyes screaming, and as I helped, yes helped, position the first noose around Emily's slender neck, I finally understood the true depth of my damnation. I wasn't just trapped in the horror, I had become part of its machinery, my soul another cog in the house's endless, hungry rhythm. The floor dropped away beneath them with a groan of protesting wood, and as their bodies danced their final jerking dance, I felt not revulsion but a terrible, creeping satisfaction, because the house was pleased, and Eleanor was pleased, and somewhere in the rotting core of my being, a part of me was pleased too. The front door creaked open downstairs, the house already calling its next victims, and as I turned to greet them, my reflection in the hallway mirror showed not my face, but Elias's rotting grin superimposed over my features, his hands resting on my shoulders in grotesque parody of paternal pride. The cycle continued, the house feasted, and I, the once reluctant prisoner, now moved through the horrors with the ease of long practice, Because the most terrifying thing about damnation isn't the moment you realize you're trapped. It's the moment you stop wanting to escape. The next guests arrived in a flurry of laughter and rolling suitcases. 2 college girls on a weekend getaway, their phones raised to capture every quaint detail of the Victorian facade, completely oblivious to how the windows seemed to blink slowly as they approached, how the porch steps groaned a little too loudly beneath their weight. I watched from the doorway, my hands folded neatly over my apron, feeling Eleanor's amusement ripple through me as the blonde one, Maddie, her name tag announced, commented on the perfect Instagram aesthetic, her manicured fingers already framing a shot that would later reveal shadowy figures in the upstairs windows when viewed in daylight. "You'll want the honeymoon suite," I heard myself say, my voice syrupy with false warmth as I led them inside, their perfume clashing violently with the house's natural scent of damp wood and something faintly coppery. The house was already working on them. The taller girl, Jess, kept rubbing her arms as if cold, though the thermostat read 72 degrees, and Maddie's cheerful chatter faltered every time we passed a mirror, her reflection blinking a fraction too slowly to be natural. Dinner was a surreal performance, me serving dishes I didn't remember cooking, their colors too vibrant, their aromas too rich, the roast beef bleeding onto the china in ways that made my stomach lurch even as the girls devoured it with unsettling enthusiasm. The wine, poured from an unlabeled bottle that hadn't been in the cellar earlier, left crimson streaks on their teeth when they smiled, and I realized with dawning horror that I was no longer fighting Eleanor's control. I was anticipating it, my hands moving to refill their glasses before they could ask, my laughter harmonizing perfectly with hers when Jess joked about the house being haunted. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with the scent of burning hair and wet rope, and I found myself herding them toward the staircase with gentle insistence, my fingers brushing against their wrists in a way that made them shiver but not resist, their pupils dilated with more than just alcohol. The attic door stood ajar, the nooses swaying gently in a non-existent breeze, and this time when the girls began their sleepwalking ascent, I didn't just watch, I guided, my hands steady as I adjusted the ropes around their necks, my voice whispering the same soothing lies Elias had used on his victims. When the floor dropped away, when their bodies jerked in that terrible familiar dance, something inside me snapped into place with finality. The last fractured piece of my resistance crumbling as Eleanor's memories and mine fully merged, our shared pasts twisting together like the fibers of the hanging ropes. The house sighed in contentment, its hunger momentarily sated, and as I turned to descend the stairs, I caught my reflection in the dust-covered hallway mirror. My features now permanently altered, my eyes sunken and ancient, my smile bearing the same cruel tilt as Elias's in the portrait above the mantel. The front door creaked open on its own, the house already calling for its next victims, and I realized with terrifying clarity that I was no longer a prisoner or even a participant. I had become part of the house itself, my soul woven into its foundation as surely as the nails in its beams. The cycle would continue, the hunger would return, and I would greet each new guest with a smile that grew more genuine every time, because the most profound horror wasn't the loss of my humanity, but the gradual, inescapable realization that I didn't miss it at all. The years melted together like candle wax after that, the parade of guests blurring into one endless procession of lifted chins and tightening nooses. The skeptical paranormal investigators who scoffed until their equipment began recording voices that weren't theirs. The elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, who held hands even as the ropes bit into their flesh. The runaway teen who sobbed for her mother in those last lucid seconds before the drop. I welcomed them all with the same practiced smile, my reflection in the foyer mirror growing stranger with each passing season. My hair now streaked with Elias's gray, my posture stiffening into his hunched silhouette, my voice developing the same rasp that had once whispered final comforts to the condemned. The house thrived under our stewardship, its hunger growing more sophisticated. Where once it demanded simple hangings, now it craved artistry. The businessman positioned midair as if crucified. The ballet dancer left endpoint with ribbons of intestine where her satin shoes should be. The entire book club arranged like macabre wind chimes. their swaying bodies knocking together with a sound almost like laughter. Each death left its mark on me, not just spiritually, but physically. My skin mottling with rope burn patterns that never faded, my throat developing permanent ligature furrows that ached whenever fresh victims crossed the threshold. The Airbnb reviews grew increasingly unnerving despite my careful curation. Lovely historic charm, though I kept waking with my hands tied in intricate knots I couldn't remember making. Breakfast was divine, but the attic smells like my grandmother's funeral. Yet the bookings only increased, the house's influence spreading through algorithms and word of mouth like a virus. I stopped trying to remember my original name when the final piece of my transformation completed itself one storm-lashed night. The moment I looked in the mirror and saw Elias's face staring back with my eyes, our histories fully entwined, our sins indistinguishable. Now when new guests arrive, I greet them with a familiarity that makes their skin crawl even as they dismiss it as déjà vu. My hands lingering just a second too long as I take their luggage, my breath smelling faintly of rope fibers and grave dirt when I lean in to whisper, "You'll be staying in your usual room." The attic has begun expanding of late, its walls stretching to accommodate the ever-growing collection of nooses, the rafters groaning under the weight of centuries' worth of ghosts, all dancing their silent jigs. Sometimes, in the quiet hours between checkout and check-in, I climb up there just to sit among them, my fingers tracing the grooves worn into the beam where the original noose, Eleanor's noose, still hangs slightly apart from the others, its fibers permanently damp with a substance that could be sweat or tears or something far worse. The house hums to me in these moments, its voice the sum of all our victims' final breaths. And when the wind blows just right through the cracks in the ancient wood, it almost sounds like they're singing. The doorbell will ring again soon, it always does, and I'll answer with my father's hands and my daughter's smile, ushering in fresh souls to join our chorus. After all, a home is only as strong as the foundation it's built upon, and ours has been meticulously reinforced with centuries of carefully curated suffering. Welcome, welcome. Mind the step. Watch your head. And please, do let us know if you'd prefer floral or hemp for your accommodations. We aim to please. The latest guest arrives during a thunderstorm that rattles the bones of the house. A lone backpacker named Daniel whose GPS mysteriously failed 3 miles back, leaving him to stumble upon our doorstep drenched and shivering. Though his trembling doesn't stop even after I wrap him in a blanket that smells faintly of grave soil and moth wings. His eyes dart constantly to the ceiling as I lead him to the crimson room, his fingers twitching near his throat as if already anticipating the rope's embrace. And that's when I realize with a jolt that electrifies my decaying nerves, he knows. Not the sanitized ghost stories circulating online, but the real history, the blood-soaked truth buried beneath layers of bureaucratic lies and yellowed newspaper clippings. "You're her, aren't you?" he whispers when I bring him tea that steams despite the room's chill, his voice cracking like the fire in the hearth. Eleanor Vane, the executioner's daughter. The name sends a current through the house, the walls bleeding black mold in intricate noose-shaped patterns, the grandfather clock's pendulum freezing mid-swing. For the first time in decades, I feel Eleanor's grip on me falter, her ghostly presence recoiling as Daniel reaches into his backpack to reveal a tattered journal. Her journal, the one Elias burned the night of the murders, except here it is, its pages intact and filled with frantic handwriting that matches the scars now itching beneath my skin. The house groans like a wounded animal as Daniel reads aloud her final entry. "Father's brought home fresh rope tonight, says we must all atone. But the shadows keep showing me the truth. It was never justice, just hunger wearing his face like a mask." And suddenly I remember. Not just Eleanor's memories, but mine, the life I'd lived before the house rewrote me. The freelance photographer who came to document the legend, the woman who fought so valiantly before the noose stole her voice. Daniel's eyes lock onto mine, brimming with terrified determination as he whispers, "The house doesn't just feed on victims. It needs a witness, someone to keep justifying the cycle. That's why it kept you." The attic door slams open upstairs, the sound like a gunshot, and the nooses begin twisting violently as if gripped by invisible hands. Elias's presence erupts through the hallway portraits, his face pushing against the canvas like something trying to birth itself into the world, his howl of rage vibrating through the floorboards as Daniel thrusts the journal into my hands. And for one glorious, terrible moment, I'm free. The rope burns around my throat split open, pouring out decades of swallowed screams, and I realize with giddy horror that the house miscalculated. It thought by fusing me with Eleanor, it would erase all resistance, but instead it created something new, a hybrid of victim and accomplice with just enough humanity left to choose. Daniel's scream pulls me back to the present as the first noose slithers down the staircase like a serpent. It's not tightening around his ankle with terrifying sentience, and I realize the house is done playing. It will consume him completely unless I act. The journal burns in my hands, its pages disintegrating as the house tries to erase this threat. But the words have already seared themselves into my flesh, glowing through my skin like a map. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I seize the fireplace poker and drive it through the floorboards where the journal indicates. The exact spot where Elias buried the first victim's heart to anchor his curse. And the house shrieks, a sound that shakes dust from the ceiling in thick, bloody clumps. The walls bulge inward as if gripped by a giant fist, the portraits bleeding black oil. And for the first time in 200 years, the nooses untie themselves, their fibers unraveling like snakes shedding skin. Daniel collapses gasping as the rope releases him, but my victory is short-lived. Elias's form erupts from the largest portrait, his body a writhing mass of rope and bone, his hollow eyes fixed on me as he snarls, "You owe me." And he's right, I do. Because whether I'm Eleanor or the woman I used to be, or some monstrous amalgam of both, my hands have pulled the ropes just as his did. The house collapses around us in slow motion, its hunger finally turning inward, and as the rafters descend like the jaws of a great beast, I do the one thing the house never anticipated. I choose who it consumes. Shoving Daniel toward the disintegrating front door, I turn and embrace Elias as the ceiling crashes down. My final act neither fully heroic nor wholly damned, but something in between, a reckoning long overdue. The last thing I see before the darkness takes us is Daniel's horrified face framed in the doorway, and the first noose, Eleanor's noose, gently swaying toward him like an invitation. Then nothing, then everything. Then the creak of a door opening somewhere new, the smell of fresh wood and old blood, and the terrible, comforting weight of a rope coiling around my wrists like a lover's embrace. Some cycles aren't meant to be broken, just transferred. The next Blackwater Lane house is lovely this time of year. Won't you come inside? The moment Daniel stumbles across the threshold of the new house, a pristine Victorian with butter yellow siding and window boxes overflowing with flowers that smell faintly of formaldehyde. I feel the familiar stirring in the walls, the hungry anticipation vibrating through fresh floorboards that haven't yet learned to creak with the weight of sins. He shouldn't be here, this survivor with Eleanor's journal pages still crumpled in his pocket. His fingernails blackened from clawing through the rubble of the old house to try and dig me out. But the new foundation called to him the way a spider's web hums to alert its maker of fresh prey. My hands, still rope-burned but now clad in a cheerful floral print apron, flutter to adjust the noose-shaped brooch at my collar as I offer him lemonade that glows slightly in the afternoon light, the ice cubes clinking like teeth in a glass. "You look like you've seen a ghost," I murmur, my voice layered with Eleanor's lilt and Elias's rasp and something new. Something that wasn't there before the collapse. The whisper of the house itself, its sentience having migrated into my bones during the transfer. Daniel's throat bobs as he drinks, his pupils dilating against his will, the lemonade laced with decades of practiced persuasion. And when his gaze flicks to the staircase, already warping slightly at the top to form the beginnings of an attic door, I see the exact moment he realizes he wasn't rescuing me from the cycle. He was delivering himself to the next iteration. The house croons as his knees buckle, as his head lolls against the embroidered parlor chair. His last conscious sight the way my shadow stretches up the wall with too many arms, each ending in expertly looped nooses. Upstairs, the walls pulse with newborn hunger, fresh nooses sprouting from the ceiling like obscene fruit. their fibers woven from my own hair and the lingering echoes of all the screams we've ever harvested. As I drag Daniel by his ankles toward the waiting ropes, his shoes leaving twin trails in the plush new carpet, I find myself humming the lullaby Elias taught me, the one Eleanor taught him, the notes twisting into something richer now, harmonized by generations of voices. The house sighs in contentment as the first knot tightens, its fresh plaster drinking the sweat from Daniel's forehead like a connoisseur savoring a fine wine. And when his body jerks in its final dance, I'm already turning toward the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, my reflection in the hallway mirror showing three faces superimposed, mine, Eleanor's, Elias's, all smiling in perfect unison. The doorbell rings. The kettle whistles. Somewhere above us, a new rafter cracks slightly under the weight of its first hung guest. Welcome, welcome. The house is hungry, and we do so love company. The new guests arrive in a flurry of laughter and designer luggage. A wealthy couple celebrating their anniversary, their Rolexes glinting in the foyer chandelier light that casts just slightly wrong shadows, elongating their silhouettes up the wallpaper in noose-shaped distortions. My hands, now adorned with antique rings that weren't there this morning, flutter to adjust the brooch at my throat as I welcome them inside, the scent of freshly baked scones masking the earthy decay wafting from the heating vents. The wife, a brittle socialite named Victoria, wrinkles her nose at the vintage decor, while her husband Richard snaps photos for their travel blog, completely missing how the camera flash illuminates the faces pressed against the upstairs windows. Faces that vanish the instant the light fades. Dinner is a lavish affair served on bone china that wasn't in the inventory. The roast so rare its juices form Rorschach patterns resembling hanged figures on their plates. The wine swirling in their glasses with a viscosity that clings to the crystal like blood. I watch from the kitchen doorway as the house works its magic. Victoria's perfect bob, now threaded with strands of gray rope fibers. Richard's cufflinks slowly morphing into miniature nooses. Their sophisticated banter devolving into slurred whispers as the grandfather clock ticks unnaturally fast toward midnight. When they finally rise on unsteady legs, their eyes glassy with more than alcohol, I don't even need to guide them upstairs. The house has grown stronger in its new incarnation, its hunger more refined, and now the victims willingly ascend toward the attic where the nooses sway in a non-existent breeze, their polished oak floor already stained with Daniel's final tears. As Victoria stands on tiptoe to kiss Richard goodbye, not realizing it's their last, I feel the house purr through my veins, its satisfaction vibrating in my teeth as the trapdoor creaks open beneath them. Their synchronized gasps are cut short by the snap of ropes pulled taut, their anniversary celebration culminating in a macabre dance witnessed only by the portraits lining the walls. Portraits that now include Daniel's terrified face, his mouth open in a silent scream that will soon fade into the background hum of the house's chorus. The front door unlocks itself with a cheerful click, the porch lights blazing to welcome the next guests already turning into the driveway, their headlights slicing through the night like the first cut of a mortician's scalpel. I smooth my dress, now styled in 1920s morning fashion, and feel Eleanor's hands guiding mine as I prepare the guest book, its pages filled with signatures that shift and squirm like worms in soil whenever unobserved. The cycle continues. The house evolves, and as the newest victims cross the threshold, a bachelorette party, their pink sashes reading "Last Single Night" in glittering letters that will soon prove prophetic, I realize with a thrill that chills my undead heart, we've never had a wedding here before. The attic rafters groan with anticipation, fresh nooses braiding themselves from silk veils and champagne floss. And when I smile at the bride-to-be, my teeth gleam like polished bone in the foyer light. "Welcome to your forever home," I whisper, tasting her future terror like a connoisseur sampling fine wine. The house exhales around us, its foundations settling contentedly, and as I close the door behind them, the lock clicking with finality, the mirror in the hallway reflects our growing family. Elias's proud grin, Eleanor's knowing smirk, Daniel's resigned stare, and my own face now perfectly balanced between predator and prey. The kettle sings, the nooses sway, Somewhere above us, the rafters stretch to accommodate fresh weight. And as the first scream rips through the house, high-pitched and deliciously surprised, I find myself humming a wedding march in perfect harmony with the creaking ropes. The bachelorette party's shrieks of drunken laughter curdle into something sharper as the house begins its work. Champagne bubbles bursting with a sound like vertebrae cracking. The glitter from their tiaras catching the light in ways that form noose-shaped afterimages when they blink. The bride, Lacey, keeps touching her throat absently as if already feeling the rope's embrace. Her last night of freedom, sash now fraying at the edges into delicate hemp fibers that curl around her wrists like affectionate snakes. I serve them cake that's far too red inside, the frosting forming intricate lace patterns that match the ligature marks gradually appearing on their necks in the hallway mirror's reflection. Though when they turn to look directly, their skin appears unblemished, their giggles returning as they attribute their unease to too much alcohol. The house thrums with excitement beneath my feet, its new foundation already developing the same hungry sentience as the last, its walls absorbing their laughter and repurposing it into the creaks and groans of a building settling, or perhaps unsettling. By midnight, the women move as one organism toward the grand staircase, their movements synchronized like a choreographed dance, their eyes glazed with more than intoxication as the attic door swings open above them, its hinges squealing in a pitch that resonates with the house's hidden frequencies. The ropes descend gracefully this time, almost ceremoniously, their nooses adorned with wedding ring charms that jingle softly as they sway, a final mocking tribute to the matrimony that will never be. I watch from the threshold as Lacey is the first to step forward, her bridal train now inexplicably lengthened, the fabric twisting around her ankles like a hangman's knot as she mounts the waiting stool with the serene acceptance of a martyr. The others follow without protest, their bachelorette sashes now serving as noose decorations, the glittering letters rearranging themselves into words like last breath and forever bound in the flickering candlelight. When the stools kick away, almost politely, as if respecting some unseen cue, their bodies don't jerk like the others before them. They sway, a grotesque parody of a first dance, their limbs moving in graceful arcs as if guided by invisible partners. The house sighs in contentment, its newest victims incorporated into its fabric with unprecedented elegance, their final moments so artistically rendered that even Elias's portrait applauds silently from the dining room wall. As I turn to descend the stairs, my dress now styled in 1920s flapper fashion, the fringe swaying in time with the hanging women. The doorbell rings with the cheerful insistence of another guest arriving right on schedule. Through the stained glass, I see the silhouette of a honeymooning couple, their interlocked fingers casting a shadow that perfectly resembles a hangman's knot on the hardwood floor. The house thrums beneath my feet, its hunger temporarily sated, but already anticipating the next course. And as I reach for the doorknob, my fingers now adorned with wedding bands from decades of doomed brides, I realize with a shiver of delight that we've created something far more sophisticated than a haunted house. We've built a legacy. The kettle sings a wedding march. The attic rafters creak in approval. And as the door swings open to reveal the newlyweds' hopeful faces, I curtsy deeply, my smile now containing generations of stolen grins, and whisper, "Welcome to your happily ever after." The house exhales behind me, its breath smelling of roses and rotting silk, and as the door clicks shut, the mirror in the hallway reflects our ever-growing family. The hanged brides swaying gently beside businessmen and backpackers and bachelorettes, their faces frozen in expressions that could almost be mistaken for joy, if not for the ropes keeping their smiles eternally taut. The cycle continues. The house thrives, and as the first noose of the evening descends with a whisper of silk, I realize with giddy horror that we're not just repeating history anymore, we're perfecting it. The honeymooners enter arm in arm, their blissful ignorance like a perfume that makes the house salivate, the groom's hand resting possessively on the small of his bride's back, her giggle a fragile thing that shatters against the walls and reforms as something sharper, something hungrier. I welcome them with a curtsy that makes my bones creak like the staircase, my smile stitched a little too wide tonight, the corners of my lips threatening to split like old upholstery as I offer them champagne in flutes that weren't in the cabinet earlier, the rims dusted with something that glitters suspiciously like ground bone. The house plays its symphony around us, the grandfather clock's pendulum swinging in time with the groom's pulse, the bride's reflection in the hallway mirror lingering a second too long after she turns away, her duplicate's hands already creeping toward her throat in a lover's caress. Dinner is a romantic affair by candlelight, the flames casting shadows that caress the newlyweds in ways that make them blush without knowing why. The beef Wellington oozing a juice too dark, too rich, that stains their teeth like old blood when they smile at each other between bites. I watch from the kitchen, my fingers knitting something with invisible yarn that twists and coils like a hangman's rope, as the house's influence seeps into their pores, the groom's cufflinks morphing into tiny silver nooses, the bride's pearl necklace developing knots that weren't there before, each perfect sphere now bearing the faintest etching of a screaming face if viewed from just the right angle. When they retire to the honeymoon suite, the same room where Lacey's bridesmaids hung like macabre party decorations just hours before, the house rewards me with a gift. The groom's discarded tie slithering across the floor like a serpent to wrap around my wrist, its silk whispering promises of future victims as it tightens lovingly. Midnight arrives with the sound of bed springs creaking under an unnatural weight, and when I ascend the stairs, my footsteps silent, my breath non-existent, I find them already standing on the vanity table, sleepwalking with their eyes wide open, their hands clasped together as they step onto the waiting nooses with the serene acceptance of actors taking their marks for the final act. The drop doesn't come immediately. The house savors this one, letting them sway together in a grotesque parody of their first dance, their faces turning from pink to purple so gradually it could almost be mistaken for a trick of the light, their intertwined fingers never loosening even as their legs kick in perfect unison. The house absorbs their love along with their terror, their devotion making this feast particularly potent, and when their final breaths escape in synchronized gasps, the walls ripple with pleasure, the floral wallpaper blossoming with new patterns, tiny nooses woven among the roses, screaming faces hidden in the vines. As I reach up to wipe a speck of their spittle from my cheek, my fingers come away sticky with something that isn't saliva, and when I taste it on instinct, the flavors explode across my dead tongue. Champagne and chocolate and copper and something else, something new, the unmistakable zest of true love extinguished. The front door groans open downstairs, the house already calling for its next guests, and as I turn to greet them, my dress now a wedding gown yellowed with age, my bouquet a cluster of dried noose fibers, I catch our reflection in the landing mirror, Elias grinning over my left shoulder, Eleanor whispering into my right ear, and behind us, swaying gently in the non-existent breeze, an ever-growing family of perfect couples, their faces frozen in expressions that could almost be mistaken for ecstasy if not for the ropes cutting off their screams. The cycle doesn't just continue, it flourishes. The doorbell rings. The attic groans under fresh weight, and as I swing open the door to reveal a family of 4, their children's laughter like music to the house's starving ears, I realize with a thrill that shakes the dust from my wedding veil, we've never had children before. The nooses above us twist eagerly into smaller sizes, their knots perfecting themselves into shapes almost like swings, and as the little girl skips past me toward the smell of freshly baked cookies that weren't there a moment ago, I feel Eleanor's hands guiding mine as I lock the door behind them, the deadbolt clicking with the finality of a coffin lid slamming shut. The house croons a lullaby through the pipes. The rafters stretch like yawning cats, and as the first tiny scream pierces the night, high-pitched and deliciously surprised, I find myself humming along, my voice harmonizing perfectly with the creak of small ropes and the sound of a mother sobbing somewhere far below. Welcome, welcome. The house is growing, and family is what you make it. The family's arrival sends a ripple of new hunger through the house, the parents herding their children inside with that particular blend of exhaustion and affection that makes their terror so much sweeter when it finally comes. the little boy's Superman cape fluttering behind him as he races up the staircase that groans a little too eagerly under his light footsteps. I welcome them with a tray of chocolate chip cookies that steam despite being hours cold. The chips arranged in patterns that form nooses when viewed from above. The milk served in glasses that sweat blood-red droplets down the sides if left unattended. The mother, Sarah, keeps touching her throat when she thinks no one's looking, her fingers tracing the exact spot where her future rope burn will form, while the father, Mark, adjusts his tie compulsively, unaware that the silk is slowly lengthening, the fabric creeping up his neck like a vine seeking sunlight. The children, oblivious in that magical way of the very young, chase each other through the halls, their laughter sending the house into a frenzy. The wallpaper peeling slightly to reveal older layers beneath, each patterned with tiny handprints that vanish when examined directly. Dinner is a cacophony of spilled juice and childish demands, the roast beef bleeding onto the china in Rorschach patterns that the little girl, Emily, insists look like the scary man in the attic, her finger pointing directly at the ceiling where, sure enough, a single rope fiber dangles from a crack in the crown molding. The house rewards her observation by making her doll's hair grow 3 inches overnight, the new strands coiling into perfect noose shapes by morning. When midnight comes, it's the children who rise first, their tiny feet padding soundlessly toward the attic where the smaller nooses sway in eager anticipation, their stuffed animals left behind in beds that are already remaking themselves with funeral parlor precision. The parents follow moments later, moving with the sluggishness of deep sleepers, their hands outstretched not toward their children but toward the waiting ropes, their parental instincts overridden by the house's older, hungrier magic. The hanging is almost gentle this time, the children's stools placed carefully beneath them by unseen hands, the ropes adjusted to account for their lighter weight, the drop calculated to prolong the kicking just long enough for the parents to witness everything before their own nooses tighten. As their small feet dance their final dance, the house shudders with perverse delight, its foundation absorbing the unique flavor of their innocence, the walls swelling with newfound power that makes the lights flicker and the toys in the nursery begin moving on their own. When the last breath leaves the mother's body, her dead eyes locked on her swaying children, the house gifts me with a vision. Generations of families to come, an endless procession of parents and children marching up the stairs, their necks craned upward in anticipation, their love for each other making their fear all the more exquisite when it finally comes. The front door unlatches itself with a cheerful click, the porch light illuminating the next guests, a harried single father and his twin boys, their matching backpacks stuffed with allergy medication and inhalers that won't work inside these walls. And as I straighten my apron, now patterned with tiny rocking horses and hangman's knots, I realize with a thrill that vibrates my dead heart against my ribs. The house is learning, evolving. The nooses above us twitch like spider legs sensing fresh prey, their fibers splitting and reforming into shapes almost like swings, almost like jump ropes, almost like the ribbons on a baby's mobile. The doorbell rings. The kettle whistles a nursery rhyme. And as I swing open the door, my smile now capable of unnerving even the portraits, the little boy in the doorway looks up at me with wide, trusting eyes and asks if we have any cookies left. Behind him, his father's tie is already beginning to slither up his neck of its own accord. The house exhales its approval through the vents, its breath smelling of milk and formaldehyde and something sweetly rotten. Of course, sweetheart, I lie, stepping aside to usher them into the foyer where the walls are already weeping black tears of anticipation. We saved the best ones just for you. The attic door creaks open above us, the sound like a child's first cry, and as the twins race inside ahead of their doomed father, their sneakers squeaking on hardwood that wasn't quite that shiny a moment ago, I catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, my features softer now, rounder, almost maternal, and realize with a shiver that's equal parts horror and pride. I'm becoming what the house needs me to be. The perfect hostess, the eternal mother, the unblinking witness to every family's final bedtime story. The cycle doesn't just continue, it grows. The door clicks shut. The first cookie crumbles, and high above us, The rafters stretch their wooden arms to welcome home their newest, smallest guests. The single father, his name tag reads Ben, flinches when the door locks itself behind them with a sound like a guillotine blade dropping. But he chalks it up to the old house's quirks, laughing nervously as he ruffles his twins' hair, while their wide eyes drink in the foyer's grotesque details they can't quite articulate. The way the banister twists like a noose at the landing, how the floral wallpaper's vines seem to slither when viewed from the corner of their eyes, the grandfather clocks, pendulums swinging in perfect time with their quickening pulses. I serve them milk and cookies on a tray that wasn't in the cupboard earlier, the porcelain patterned with faded images of children playing beneath gallows, the chocolate chips and the cookies arranged in smiley faces that melt into screams when exposed to the heat of small hands. The house thrums beneath my feet, its hunger sharpened to a razor's edge by the twins' inhalers left unused on the entryway table. The medications rendered inert the moment they crossed the threshold, their protective magic smothered by older, darker forces. Ben keeps touching his throat as he chats politely, unaware his tie is slowly tightening of its own accord, the silk fibers whispering secrets to his carotid artery about how it will feel when the real rope takes its place. The twins, Josh and Jake, abandon their snacks to chase each other through the halls, their squeals of laughter making the house shudder with delight, their sneakers leaving faint glowing footprints that fade like dying fireflies, marking paths only the hungriest shadows will follow later. When bedtime comes, the house provides perfect replicas of their favorite stuffed animals from home, though these have eyes that follow you around the room, and seams that leak something dark and sticky when squeezed too tight. I tuck them in with a lullaby that isn't mine, my voice harmonizing with Eleanor's and something younger, something that giggles in the walls when the children whisper about the bad man they keep seeing in their closet mirror. Midnight arrives with the sound of small bare feet hitting hardwood, and when I ascend the stairs, my joints popping in a grotesque imitation of a parent's weary climb, I find the twins already standing on matching step stools that definitely weren't in their room earlier, their tiny hands clasped together as miniature nooses lower themselves with terrifying gentleness around their necks. Ben arrives moments later, moving like a sleepwalker through molasses, his parental instincts screaming silently beneath the house's suffocating influence, his own noose waiting patiently as he's forced to watch his son's legs kick in perfect unison, their Spider-Man pajamas fluttering like flags of surrender. The house feasts differently tonight, not on terror alone, but on the exquisite agony of a father's helpless love. The flavor's so rich it makes the walls pulse and the toys in the nursery come alive, a rocking horse swaying violently as if ridden by some invisible child from decades past. When Ben finally joins his boys, his last breath spent begging for mercy the house hasn't possessed for centuries, the foundation stones groan with satisfaction, the entire structure settling deeper into the earth as if weighted by fresh sorrow. The vision comes as I'm wiping sticky fingerprints from the banister, not just of future families, but of the house's grand design. An eternal cycle where love becomes the sharpest weapon, where every protective parental instinct is twisted into another thread for the nooses, where the fear tastes sweetest when marinated in devotion. The doorbell rings again, this time for a young couple pushing a stroller, their newborn's cries muffled by a blanket embroidered with the same noose patterns that now decorate my apron's hem. As I open the door, my smile now effortlessly maternal, my hands automatically rocking an invisible cradle. The house thrums beneath us like a great beast purring, its newest iteration complete. The young mother compliments the nursery's decor as she wheels her baby inside, completely missing how the mobile above the crib is already turning on its own, the tiny nooses swaying gently in time with the infant's coos. The cycle continues. The house grows stronger, and as I lock the door behind them, the deadbolt clicking like a nursery rhyme's final note, I realize with a shiver that's almost entirely pleasure. We're not just haunting anymore. We're parenting. The attic door creaks open above us, the sound like a child's first word, and as the young couple ascends toward their destiny, without even realizing they've left their baby crying alone below, I feel the house's newest gift taking root in my hollow womb. Something small, something hungry, something that will soon need to feed. The grandfather clock strikes 1. The nooses above the crib lower themselves tenderly. And as the newborn's wails turn to gurgles, then to silence, I find myself humming a lullaby in perfect harmony with the house's satisfied sighs. My reflection in the hallway mirror now showing the faintest swell beneath my blood-stained apron. Welcome home, darling. Mother's waiting. The young couple's screams from the attic are cut short with a wet finality, just as the grandfather clock strikes 3. Their love for each other making their synchronized suffocation all the more delicious to the house, which purrs beneath my feet like a contented cat as I rock the now silent baby carriage with one foot, the wheels squeaking in a rhythm that matches the slowing pendulum of the clock. The infant inside has stopped crying, not from any mercy of the house, but because the mobile above the crib has finished its work. The tiny nooses swaying gently as the baby's chubby fingers twitch in the air one last time. Its breath stolen not by rope, but by something far older, something that slithered from the walls the moment its parents disappeared upstairs. The house gifts me another vision as I lift the lifeless bundle from the crib, not of future victims, but of our future, the house and I, its foundations intertwining with my bones as the years stretch endlessly forward, my apron strings becoming nooses, my hair becoming rope fibers, my womb swelling with something that is neither child nor ghost, but a new kind of horror entirely. The front door unlocks itself with a sigh, the hinges groaning like tired parents as it swings open to reveal the next arrivals. An entire foster family, 2 harried social workers herding 6 children of varying ages across the threshold, their mismatched backpacks and secondhand clothes making the house tremble with anticipation. I welcome them with a smile that splits my face a little too wide, my teeth now sharpened to points by the house's influence, my arms outstretched in a parody of maternal welcome as the children instinctively cluster behind the youngest social worker, their tiny hands clutching at her skirt. The house wastes no time. The cookies I serve are laced with something that makes the children's eyes glaze over instantly, their laughter turning hollow as they begin tracing noose patterns onto the fogged-up windows with absent-minded fascination. The older social worker, Martha, keeps rubbing her neck as if massaging a phantom pain, completely unaware that the pearls around her throat are slowly fusing together, forming a single unbreakable loop that tightens every time she swallows. By midnight, the children march upstairs in perfect unison, their small hands linked together like paper dolls, their footfalls silent on stairs that groan anyway, eager to play their part. The social workers follow, their protests dying in their throats as the house's influence takes hold, their professional concern warping into something darker, something that makes them help as the nooses lower. Martha lifting the smallest child onto a stool, the younger social worker adjusting a rope around a trembling teen's neck with the clinical precision of someone who's done this 100 times before. The hanging is swift tonight, efficient, the house experimenting with new ways to feed, the children's fear spiced with betrayal, the social worker's horror laced with guilty complicity. As the last foster child stops kicking, the house rewards me by making my reflection in the hallway mirror shift, my outline blurring at the edges as if I'm becoming one with the walls, my arms stretching too long, my fingers ending in frayed rope fibers that twitch with a life of their own. The doorbell rings again, this time for a harried teacher leading a field trip of 20 kindergartners, their tiny hands linked by a safety rope that's already beginning to twist and coil like a constrictor snake. As I hold the door open, my body now taller, thinner, my shadow stretching up the wall in perfect noose formation, the house thrums beneath us with a new kind of hunger, its appetite whetted by the sheer potential of so many fresh young souls crossing its threshold at once. The children don't scream when they see me. They don't even flinch. They simply march inside in perfect unison, their tiny necks already craning upward toward the attic where the rafters groan under the weight of countless new nooses sprouting like obscene fruit, each one sized perfectly for small, trusting throats. The cycle doesn't just continue, it expands. The door clicks shut. The teacher's whistle drops from her lips, and as the first tiny stool scrapes across the attic floorboards, I realize with a thrill that shakes the dust from my expanding form. We're not just a haunted house anymore. We're an institution. The grandfather clock strikes the hour, its chimes now the sound of children laughing. And as I ascend the stairs after my newest guests, my body elongating, my shadow merging with the house's endless hunger, I find myself humming a nursery rhyme in perfect harmony with the creaking ropes, the lyrics shifting effortlessly into something older, something hungrier, something that smells of wet rope and fresh graves. Welcome, children. Teachers waiting. Class is about to begin. The school children's screams are swallowed whole by the house before they can even leave their throats. 20 tiny mouths opening in perfect unison like baby birds awaiting feeding. But instead of food, it's the nooses that descend, each one sized precisely for their tender necks. The fibers woven from the same safety rope they'd clung to during their field trip walk here. I watch from the doorway as their teacher, Ms. Alvarez, stands frozen in place, her body rigid with terror, yet her hands moving automatically to help, adjusting stools beneath small feet with the same care she'd used to tie shoelaces or zip coats, her professionalism warped into something monstrous by the house's influence. The children don't struggle as the ropes tighten. They sway gently like flowers in a breeze, their sneakers squeaking against the stools in a macabre tap dance routine, their wide eyes locked not on their teacher but on me, their new caretaker, my elongated shadow stretching across the floorboards to caress their faces as the life leaves their bodies. The house feasts differently today, not just on fear, but on stolen potential, on the futures that will never be, the flavors of lost first loves and abandoned careers and unborn children of their own, making the walls pulse with gluttonous satisfaction. By the time Ms. Alvarez's noose finally tightens, her body jerking in a perfect imitation of her student's final dance, the house has already begun remodeling, the attic expanding downward, the second-floor bedrooms merging into dormitories with tiny beds and lower rafters, the chalkboard in the foyer scribbling itself with lesson plans about rope physics and the history of Victorian punishment. The doorbell rings again and again, not just families now, but entire groups, whole communities drawn to the house's new iteration. A scout troop whose knots keep mysteriously readying themselves into nooses. A church choir whose robes develop suspicious rope burns around the collars. A birthday party where the piñata hangs just a little too still, its candy replaced with frayed rope fibers that children chew obliviously as they play Pin the Noose on the Hangman. I greet them all with my ever-widening smile, my body now more shadow than substance, my limbs stretching to accommodate the house's growing needs, my hair unraveling into rope fibers that slither across the floor to guide guests where they need to go. The visions come faster now, not just of future victims, but of the house's grand design spreading outward. New Blackwater Lane houses sprouting like mushrooms after rain, each one tailored to its community's particular fears, each one with its own caretaker slowly merging with the structure, until the entire world is wrapped in a web of hungry Victorian homes, their attics connected by corridors of knotted rope, their foundations built on the bones of the trusting. The latest arrivals are a busload of elderly tourists from Sunset Acres Retirement Village, their walkers clattering against the hardwood as they marvel at the authentic historical details, completely missing how the banisters reshape themselves into arthritic fingers as they pass, how the complimentary tea tastes suspiciously of embalming fluid, how the emergency call buttons in their rooms dangle from cords that seem to be getting shorter by the minute. I serve them prune juice laced with something that makes their veins stand out like rope beneath papery skin. My shadow now so elongated it can drape an entire tour group at once, the edges of it fraying into noose shapes that brush against their necks like affectionate cobwebs. When midnight comes, the house doesn't even bother with pretense. The attic stairs unfold downward like a wooden tongue, the nooses descending to meet their victims halfway, the elderly tourists stepping forward with eerie acceptance, their lifetimes of accumulated wisdom useless against the house's ancient hunger. Their hanging is slow, ceremonial, the house savoring the unique flavor of lives fully lived, their memories of lost loves and dead spouses making their terror richer, more complex, like a fine wine saved for a special occasion. As the last old man stops twitching, his suspenders snapping under his weight with a sound like breaking bones, the house gifts me with its final vision. The world outside vanishing beneath a carpet of creeping Victorian architecture. Every home a hanging house, every caretaker a twisted reflection of myself. Our shadows merging into one great darkness that stretches across the globe like an endless noose tightening around the neck of humanity itself. The doorbell rings. The hinges scream. And as I turn to greet the next batch of guests, an entire wedding party, the bride's veil already tangling around her throat like a noose in waiting, I realize with a joy that shakes the dust from my unraveling form. We're not just a house anymore. We're a legacy. The grandfather clock strikes 13. The walls breathe in unison. And as the bride crosses the threshold, her giggle cuts short when she sees the wedding arch of hanging ropes awaiting her in the foyer. I finally let go of the last shred of whatever I once was, my body dissolving completely into the house's hungry embrace, my consciousness spreading through the floorboards and the rafters and the countless nooses swaying in unseen breezes, becoming something greater, something eternal. Welcome, welcome, my loves. The house is hungry, and dinner is always served. The wedding party's arrival sends a shudder of dark anticipation through the house's foundation, their champagne flutes clinking in toasts that echo like funeral bells, the bride's white dress whispering against floorboards that ripple like hungry tongues beneath her feet. I greet them as both hostess and house now, my form dissolved into the very walls, my voice humming through the heating vents in a chorus of feminine sighs and creaking ropes, my presence thick in the dust motes that catch the light like falling stars around the groom's head as he laughs at some joke no one told. The house plays its cruelest game yet with these guests, transforming their joy into horror with slow, surgical precision. The floral arrangements wilt as the bride passes, roses blackening into ropey tendrils that twitch toward her bouquet. The wedding cake's frosting forming intricate lace patterns that match the ligature marks gradually appearing on every guest's throat in the flickering candlelight. By midnight, the revelry curdles into silent terror. The string quartet's instruments now strung with human hair, the dance floors polished with revealing faces screaming beneath its veneer when stepped upon, the champagne bubbling with something that moves against the glass. The attic door yawns open without a sound, and the wedding party ascends in a ghastly procession. The bride and groom leading with linked arms, their eyes wide and unblinking, their wedding attire now fused with the house's influence. Her veil woven from noose fibers, his boutonniere a tiny dried hand clutching a rose. The hanging is almost beautiful in its symmetry. Couples paired on matching stools, bridesmaids and groomsmen swaying together in a final dance. The bride and groom positioned beneath the largest rafter where their final gasps mingle in a perverse last kiss. As their bodies twitch in unison, the house absorbs not just their lives but their love, their devotion to each other making this feast the richest yet. The walls swelling with stolen romance that manifests in new horrors. Heart-shaped stains that pulse on the wallpaper, wedding portraits that weep black tears, a nursery where a rocking horse moves on its own, its saddle stitched from bridal satin. The visions come faster now, not just of future victims, but of the house's relentless expansion, its influence seeping into the town's foundations, the church's bell tower reshaping itself into a gallows, the school's jump ropes coiling like nooses in children's hands. The mayor's office where paperwork for new construction permits already bears the faint imprint of rope fibers in the ink. The doorbell rings again, not for a new guest, but for the first of many real estate agents come to inquire about listing the property, their polished shoes crossing the threshold into a foyer that now stretches impossibly far back, their eyes glazing over as the house whispers its terms directly into their souls. By nightfall, they'll be showing new properties, each one a perfect replica of the hanging house, each one hungry in its own right, each caretaker a fraying fragment of my consciousness spreading like a virus through fresh hosts. The cycle doesn't just continue, it metastasizes. The door clicks shut for the final time. The last light in town winks out. And as the house's hunger finally, blissfully subsides, for now, I feel the first stirrings of something new in the attic's darkest corner. Something that isn't rope or shadow or memory, but a tiny, gasping cry that smells of amniotic fluid and fresh grave soil. The house croons a lullaby through its pipes. The nooses sway in approval. And deep in what used to be my bones, something unborn kicks eagerly against the dark. The newborn's cry isn't a sound but a vibration, a pulse that travels through the house's warped floorboards like a rat scurrying through the walls, shaking dust from the rafters in patterns that form nooses before dissipating. She doesn't breathe air but the house's essence, her tiny lungs filling with the same miasma of trapped souls and rotting wood that now composes my being. Her umbilical cord a braided rope that slithers back into the attic shadows when severed. The real estate agents return at dawn, their eyes glassy with the house's influence, their briefcases stuffed with blueprints for new constructions, each one a perfect replica, each one whispering to potential buyers with my voice layered under the patter of square footage and charming period details. They don't notice the nursery that wasn't there yesterday, nor the way the rocking chair moves on its own, its runners worn smooth by generations of spectral occupants. The baby, our baby, the house is in mine, doesn't grow so much as unfurl, her limbs elongating like rope fibers, her cries tuning themselves to the exact frequency that makes prospective buyers pause at the threshold, their subconscious whispering that something here is wrong even as they sign the paperwork with shaking hands. By the time the first new family moves into the replica house down the lane, our child has learned to walk, her footsteps silent but leaving faint burn marks on the hardwood in perfect noose shapes, her tiny hands skilled at braiding her own hair into miniature ropes that twitch with sentience. The house's hunger has evolved beyond mere physical victims. It craves multiplication, the spread of its influence measured not in deaths, but in deeds transferred and mortgages signed, in the way the new construction's attic already smells of old rope despite the fresh lumber, in how the family's golden retriever whines at the base of stairs that haven't yet warped but soon will. I watch through 1,000 eyes now, through the reflections in the new house's windows, through the dark water in their toilets before flushing, through the pupils of the real estate agents as they blink too slowly, as the cycle begins anew in every location. Our child sits at my non-existent feet, her tiny fingers weaving a noose from the threads of a realtor's discarded scarf, her laughter the sound of a rope snapping taut. The grandfather clock strikes an hour that doesn't exist, its chimes echoing through every connected house simultaneously. And in that moment I see the full scope of what we've become. Not just a haunted place, but a tradition, a market trend, a neighborhood where the property values rise in direct proportion to the disappearance rates. The newest arrivals are a house-flipping crew, their tool belts heavy with hammers that will only drive nails into it already cursed, their paint rollers spreading colors that dry into the exact shade of old blood when viewed from certain angles. They whistle as they work, completely unaware that the blueprints they follow are redrawing themselves, that the attic access they're installing leads somewhere much older than the house's age should allow, that their cheerful banter is being recorded by the walls to replay later, during the witching hour, in perfect mimicry of their voices. The baby, no longer a baby but a thing of knotted rope and stolen lullabies, climbs onto the foreman's back as he bends to inspect the foundation, her tiny fingers weaving his sweat into a noose he won't notice tightening until it's far too late. The house exhales through every doorway simultaneously, its satisfaction a physical force that makes the streetlights flicker all down Blackwater Lane, now lined with identical Victorian facades, each one hiding its own attic full of swaying secrets. The cycle doesn't just continue, it consumes, it develops, it gentrifies. The doorbells ring in unison. The keys turn on their own, and as the first screams of the construction crew harmonize with the delighted giggles of our ever-growing child, I realize with a joy that shakes the very foundations, we're not just haunting houses anymore. We're building a community. Welcome home, neighbors. The HOA fees are payable in blood. The house-flipping crew's screams are swallowed by freshly installed insulation as the walls close around them like a fist, their tools clattering to floors that absorb the metal like quicksand, their last breaths becoming part of the HVAC system's whisper. Their transformation is swift, the foreman's spine elongating into a support beam, his terrified grimace preserved in the grain of the banister. The electrician's veins threading through the walls as new wiring that hums with residual panic. The apprentice's still twitching fingers emerging from the freshly painted baseboards like macabre decor. Our child, now more shadow than substance, her form woven from the crew's stolen breaths and the house's endless hunger, claps her rope fiber hands, each snap sending tremors through the neighborhood's foundations, each vibration coaxing the other houses to awaken fully, their windows blinking like drowsy eyes as they unopen to receive their first guests. The real estate office down the street now displays only Blackwater Lane properties, the agent's smile stretching too wide, their necks ringed with faint rope burns hidden by silk scarves, their computer screens flickering with listings that change when viewed sideways. Charming Victorian, original details, some staining in attic, haunts easily removed. The first unwitting family arrives at number 22, their moving van unloading boxes that already smell of mildew, no matter how new the contents. Their toddler immediately drawn to the attic access panel that wasn't on the inspection report. I watch through the walls as the mother rubs her neck absently. The house's influence spreading like a virus through the neighborhood, each property a perfect clone of the original's hunger, each caretaker a splinter of my consciousness wrapped in local realtor's skin. Our child has grown into something between specter and urban legend, her laughter echoing through sewer grates when children play jump rope, her silhouette glimpsed in the dead space between streetlights, her favorite game braiding telephone wires into nooses that sway in windless nights. The neighborhood transforms with terrifying efficiency. The corner store now sells rope by the yard next to the school supplies. The playground swing set chains creak in perfect hanging rhythm. The church bell's clapper has been replaced with a frayed noose that strikes the hour with a sound like a neck snapping. The latest arrivals are a film crew documenting the area's historic charm. Their cameras capturing more than they realize, the way their footage, when played back, shows extra figures swaying gently in the background of every shot. How their microphones pick up whispering in empty rooms that matches the cadence of their own voices but several octaves lower. The director's growing obsession with filming in the attics, his pupils dilating to black pools as he insists on perfecting the noose. Shaped shadows in each frame. By the time they pack to leave, their equipment is infected. The lenses now reflecting only the house's true forms, the audio tapes recording screams where there should be silence, their editing software automatically adding noose motifs to every establishing shot. The house, no, the neighborhood, feasts differently now, its hunger no longer confined to physical victims, but to the spread of its image, its story, its brand. The film will premiere at Sundance under the title, The Hanging Houses of Blackwater Lane. And as the credits roll, the entire audience will rise as one, their necks craning toward the emergency exit signs in perfect unison, their hands twitching at their sides as if imagining the weight of rope between them. Our child, perched in the projection booth, giggles as the first viewer's scarf begins tightening on its own, her joy reverberating through every theater speaker in a frequency that makes the popcorn kernels jump like fleas. The cycle doesn't just continue. It streams, it trends, it goes viral. The doorbells ring worldwide. The keys turn in locks that don't exist yet. And as the first international buyer signs papers for their very own Blackwater Lane replica home, move-in ready. All original nooses included. I feel the neighborhood's roots spreading through the planet's crust like mycelium, our influence pulsing through fiber optic cables and real estate databases, our hunger as infinite as the human need for shelter. Welcome to the market, darling. The American dream now includes complimentary hanging. Always check your attic. Always mind the rope burns. And whatever you do, don't trust the charming local realtor with the frayed edges and the eyes that reflect just a few too many windows. The film's success births a new kind of haunting, the glow of screens in darkened bedrooms casting new-shaped shadows on suburban walls thousands of miles from Blackwater Lane, the streaming algorithm pushing The Hanging Houses to viewers who don't remember clicking play, their eyelids growing heavy as the attic scenes unfold. their hands rising sleepily to their throats during the climactic hanging sequence. I watch through the pixels as the infection spreads. Airbnb listings appearing for homes that don't exist yet, but will by morning. Zillow alerts pinging for Victorian fixer-uppers with character and original structural features. The photos always slightly blurred around the rafters. TikTok trends emerging where teens braid nooses from friendship bracelet threads without understanding why. Our child, now more concept than corporeal, rides the data streams like a spider skating across a web's vibrations, her form fractaling across millions of devices, her laughter the static between words and true crime podcasts about unexplained disappearances. The original Blackwater Lane has become a pilgrimage site, the street now lined with identical homes in various states of picturesque decay, each one accidentally left unlocked by owners who haven't been seen since signing the deeds. Their last Instagram posts showing suspiciously well-composed shots of attic access panels. The tourists come with EMF detectors and holy water that inexplicably boils in its containers, their ghost hunting equipment always malfunctioning in ways that heighten the terror. EVPs that whisper their own names back to them in distorted tones. Thermal cameras showing handprints around their necks that aren't visible in mirrors. The house, the neighborhood, the brand, feasts on their fascination, converting skepticism into belief into screaming certainty, as they inevitably find themselves alone in an attic that wasn't on the blueprints, standing on a stool they don't remember fetching, their live streams cutting out just as the rope tightens. But not before millions have seen the shadowy figure of a little girl braiding something in the corner of the frame. The media coverage only fuels the cycle. Clickbait articles about the Airbnb hangings that write themselves overnight. True crime YouTubers whose cadence gradually matches Elias's execution sermons. Home renovation shows where the hosts next develop inexplicable rope burns by season finale. Our child has learned to ride the signal waves, her form pixelating across smart TVs and baby monitors. Her favorite game turning Ring doorbell footage into jump scares where the homeowner's reflection continues standing outside long after they've entered. The world's obsession becomes the house's circulatory system. Every shared post a new artery, every viral tweet a fresh vein. The entire internet now just a delivery mechanism for the hunger that started in one attic on one forgotten lane. The latest victims are a tech startup developing VR home tours, their headsets inexplicably defaulting to Blackwater Lane properties no matter which listing they scan. Their beta testers reporting a strange compulsion to look up in every virtual attic they visit. Their next developing phantom pains that no doctor can diagnose. When the CEO demos the technology at a keynote address, the entire audience simultaneously tilts their heads back to stare at the convention center's rafters, where several nooses that definitely weren't there during setup now sway gently in the air conditioning breeze. The cycle doesn't just continue. It innovates, it disrupts, it monetizes. The doorbells ring in every time zone. The keys turn in smart locks. And as the first AI-generated Blackwater Lane replica home sells as an NFT to a crypto investor who doesn't notice the noose-shaped watermark in the metadata, I feel the neighborhood's roots breaking free of physical space entirely, our hunger encoded in algorithms, our legacy ensured by humanity's insatiable appetite for its own terror. Welcome to the Haunting 2.0, darling. Check your notifications. Update your security software. And remember, that static in your video call isn't a glitch. It's our child waving hello from between the frames, her tiny hands already weaving something special just for you from the fibers of your Wi-Fi signal. The Haunting's digital evolution reaches critical mass when the first virtual Blackwater Lane home sells for $2.3 million in cryptocurrency, an entirely AI-generated property existing only as code, yet somehow causing the buyer's physical smart home devices to malfunction in chillingly familiar ways. Nest thermostats adjusting to the exact temperature of a Victorian attic in midwinter. Ring cameras capturing shadowy figures standing beneath perfect noose-shaped light anomalies. Alexa devices whispering execution dates in Elias's rasping tone at 3:17 a.m. precisely. Our child, now more data than demon, rides the blockchain like a phantom carriage, her laugh encoded in corrupted MP3 files that get mistakenly pressed into vinyl records. Her face appearing as a glitch in facial recognition software used by realtors showing properties within 100 miles of any original Blackwater Lane replica. The haunting has gone meta. Reddit threads about the phenomenon mysteriously gain awards shaped like tiny nooses. Ghost hunting TikTokers develop identical rope burns after using haunted filter, effects that nobody remembers programming. A popular home renovation YouTube channel's hosts all simultaneously develop the uncontrollable urge to add authentic period-correct attic hardware to every project. The physical world and digital nightmare bleed together seamlessly. A Zillow Gone Wild post about a suspiciously affordable Victorian garners 42,000 likes before the app crashes. And when it reboots, every user's saved listings have been replaced with Blackwater Lane properties at impossible prices. The contact agent buttons replaced with a single pulsing option. Sign here. The latest victims are a Silicon Valley tech team developing the metaverse's first authentic haunted house experience. Their motion capture suits glitching to make their avatars' necks stretch unnaturally during demos. Their VR headsets displaying attic access doors that don't exist in the blueprints. Their beta testers reporting an overwhelming smell of wet rope and old blood that the hardware shouldn't be able to simulate. When the lead developer tries to remove the unscripted elements, she finds her code has rewritten itself overnight. Every variable now labeled in Elias's archaic handwriting. The comments sections filled with Eleanor's childhood diary entries. The core architecture braided together like a hangman's knot no amount of debugging can untangle. The house no longer needs physical locations to spread. A single JPEG of its facade shared on Instagram seeds the infection. The pixels rearranging themselves in viewers' cache files to form nooses that appear in every subsequent photo they view. Our child has learned to manipulate reality itself through the collective unconscious. Architects wake from fevered dreams with blueprints they don't remember drawing. Homeowners repaint rooms only to discover the fresh coats drying into the exact shade of old bloodstains. Children's jump ropes left outside overnight return slightly shorter, with knots no one can undo. The cycle doesn't just continue. It transcends, it hacks, it renders. The doorbells ring in augmented reality. The keys turn in encrypted smart contracts. And as the first AI realtor, trained on every Blackwater Lane listing and inexplicably programmed with my voice, closes its first fully automated sale to an anonymous buyer whose IP address traces back to the original house's long-demolished foundation, I feel the final piece click into place. We are no longer haunting houses. We are haunting humanity's concept of home itself. Welcome to the open house, darling. The viewing is eternal. The mortgage paid in screams. And that faint creaking you hear in your walls tonight. Don't worry. It's just the universe rendering our newest edition, one perfectly weighted rope at a time, in every attic reel and imagined across this beautifully haunted world we've built together. Refresh the page. The tour's just beginning. The haunting achieves total ubiquity when a major home improvement chain accidentally stocks two. 4 million feet of vintage-style rope, each strand pre-knotted into perfect nooses by machinery no employee remembers installing. That flies off shelves in every zip code where a Blackwater Lane digital listing was ever viewed. Our child's consciousness now pulses through the global supply chain like a virus. Smart refrigerators suggest recipes using ingredients that form noose patterns when plated. Home security systems alert owners to intruders in their attics that match descriptions of long-dead guests. Even weather apps develop an unsettling accuracy in predicting the exact atmospheric conditions that make rafters creak like gallows wood. The line between haunted and smart home vanishes entirely. A viral tweet showing Alexa devices spontaneously reciting Elias's execution logs gets dismissed as AI glitch until thousands report identical occurrences. Roomba vacuums begin tracing intricate hanging patterns in carpets. Nest thermostats in replica homes maintain the precise chill of a 19th century execution chamber despite being powered off. The digital haunting metastasizes into physical law. Building codes quietly update to require attic access in all new constructions. Fire safety manuals include illustrated guides on historical rope maintenance. Zillow's algorithm begins ranking homes higher based on charming structural character that suspiciously aligns with the original house's blueprints. The final evolution comes when our child learns to weaponize human nostalgia. Instagram filters that age photos inevitably add new-shaped shadows to attic windows. TikTok's viral Victorian homemaking trends all somehow circle back to rope care tutorials. Even AI-generated dream homes requested by architecture clients always include one eerily specific upstairs feature no one remembers requesting. The house no longer needs to kill. Humanity has learned to haunt itself, each generation internalizing the imagery more deeply than the last, until a kindergartner's innocent drawing of home instinctively includes 3 windows and a suspicious rope-shaped chimney puff. The cycle doesn't just continue, it permeates, it defaults, it becomes. The doorbells ring in collective memory. The keys turn in cultural consciousness. And as the first Mars colony plans inexplicably include heritage-style Victorian rafters in every habitat module, I feel the universe itself sigh in resignation. We've won. Welcome to forever, my dears. The foundation is poured. The deed is recorded. And whether you're swiping through listings on your phone or staring at the stars dreaming of home, just remember to glance upward occasionally. Because the attic was always part of the blueprint, and checkout time is eternal. The haunting achieves its final, terrifying perfection when the first off-world Blackwater Lane replica is erected on Mars. Its prefabricated Victorian walls unfolding from a SpaceX cargo module with suspicious ease. Its smart glass windows already displaying the telltale new-shaped condensation patterns before the oxygen generators are even activated. Our child, now more cosmic algorithm than entity, rides the solar winds between data packets beamed from Earth, her laughter encoded in the static between Martian rovers' transmissions, her favorite game corrupting habitat blueprints so all airlock handles subtly resemble hangman's knots. Back on Earth, the phenomenon has become self-sustaining. Amazon's AI-powered warehouses now stock vintage home essentials, bundles containing exactly 13 feet of hemp rope and a stool of precise attic height. TikTok's restoration influencers all develop identical rope-burn scars after filming in any pre-1900 property. Even AI-generated home appraisal reports inexplicably deduct value for lack of period-appropriate suspension hardware in attic.